This is America's Roundtable from Washington, D.C., a weekly radio program with leading voices from America and international thinkers representing the academia, business, media, think tanks, and the political arena. I am Anand Samy, your co-host, joined by Natasha, Srdoc, economist and chairman of the International Leaders Summit, and guest hosts that join us on a regular basis, Becky Norton Dunlop and Maurice McTigue. We're delighted to have the Honorable Maurice McTigue join us this weekend on America's Roundtable. The Honorable Maurice McTigue joined the Mercatus Center in 1997 as a distinguished visiting scholar, following an illustrious career as New Zealand Member of Parliament, Cabinet Minister, and Ambassador. Prior to his arrival in the United States, Mr. McTigue led an ambitious and extremely successful effort to restructure New Zealand's public sector and to revitalize its stagnant economy in the 1984 through 1994 period of time. As director of the Government Accountability Project at the Mercatus Center, Mr. McTigue is sharing the lessons of his practical experience with policymakers in the United States. He works with officials in the administration, members of Congress, and state governments on applying the principles of government reform, transparency, accountability in the public sector. In 2003, he was appointed to the Office of Personnel Management Senior Review Committee, formed to make recommendations for a new human resources systems, and then the newly created Department of Homeland Security. Mr. McTigue has provided extensive strategic-level advice to the Office of Management and Budget on a wide range of management issues, including the development of a results-based program assessment tool. Most recently, Mr. McTigue has served as advisor to the governments of Louisiana, Commonwealth of Virginia, Puerto Rico, and countries in Eastern Europe on their government reform process.
What you can't really have, in my view, is a major segment of your society that is residing there illegally. You need to do something about their status. I have no idea what the proportion of the economy that's serviced by people who are here illegally at the moment that is in the black economy, but I would think that it's a very large proportion. And that means that those people, because of their illegal status, are not actually contributing to the cost of providing the services that people living in America get. It also means, though, that they're subject to exploitation because they don't have the same recourse to the courts and the justice system as other citizens because they're here illegally. Both of those are bad things, and they need to be addressed. And the only way you can address that is to deal with the illegality of their current residency and find a way of converting it to a legal residency or to remove them.
Mr. McTigue, also, what are your thoughts about Dodd-Frank Act and parts that should be replaced, as Governor Romney was mentioning?
Well, I think that the election has made it improbable that significant parts of the Dodd-Frank Act are going to be repealed. What may bring some sanity to some of those things will be what happens to the economy. If the economy continues to stutter along as it is at the moment, and we go back to growing numbers of unemployed, which at the moment I think is a possibility, I certainly think that the next review we see of growth forecasts is going to review the 2% for the last quarter downwards. And I think that the fourth quarter is going to come in with a growth rate that's below 2%. That's not acceptable. That's not growing fast enough to be able to absorb the new people coming into the labour market because they have progressed over the age of 16. You need about 135,000 jobs a month just to cope with the increase in population in the labour market. We're just getting fractionally above that. To be able to get the unemployment rate down, you need to be looking at 300,000 new jobs a month to see that significantly change over time. And to be able to get that level of jobs, you need a growth rate that's between 3 and 4% rather than one that's hovering around 1.5 to 2.
We actually received a message from one of our listeners that listened to one of your comments in previous America's Roundtable radio programs, and the message came from Britain, from UK. Part of the message says, "What a very great shame that Maurice McTigue is not an advisor to our Chancellor here." So I'm mentioning this because I believe that listeners who are listening to you talking again and again about a number of topics that would really make a significant change and a great remedy for problems and issues that U.S. is facing. Are you involved? Are you advising at this time some of the legislators or the U.S. government?
I frequently talk with and work with people who are in decision-making roles at a state level, at a federal level, and at an international level, and really just trying to get people to accept that many of the problems can be addressed by an application of common sense. The solutions frequently are much more simple than people realize, but they do need courageous leaders who are prepared to take those tough decisions and see them through. And what I think I see in Europe at the moment that is somewhat encouraging is that while much of Europe is going back into recession, the United Kingdom is managing to hold on to a tiny sliver of growth. And I think that some of the measures that the UK government has taken are starting to show effects. But also, if you look at the better managed economies of Europe, places like Finland and Denmark and the Netherlands, they are also starting to show signs of growth. So doing the right things, getting your fiscal house into order, acting responsibly, not trying to spend your way out of debt, doing things like that, I think are starting to show that you produce good results. That's encouraging. And we should be looking at more of those examples rather than listening to those who would say to us, if we only just spent more, we would be able to get out of this problem. No, when you've made a mistake, what you actually have to do is correct the mistake. For too long, governments have spent too much in the Western world and have not paid sufficient attention to the risk that you impose on your society when you accumulate large levels of debt. Those have to be addressed. No longer can they be put off, no longer can there be procrastination.
It is interesting to note, Mr. McTigue, your involvement in a number of states here in the United States. For example, with the state of Louisiana or the Commonwealth of Virginia and other places where these specific geographic locations are what we would consider laboratories of experiments in the sense of seeing how reform policies are implemented and the benefits that we're seeing now in a number of these states. So therefore, if these, say, pro-growth policies are resulting into higher employment or job creation, it's certainly a great model for the federal government as well. And it's certainly been very interesting and inspiring to see the positive results coming out of Louisiana and, for example, the Commonwealth of Virginia.
I don't think you can find a state in the United States where there is growth and reducing levels of unemployment that is badly governed. You can find states that are going the other way because they are badly governed. So what do I mean by badly governed? By my values, governments that are still acting irresponsibly in terms of spending and accumulating debt. And unless they address those issues and then unless they address the investment climate that's likely to bring investors that will create jobs, they're not going to recover. And it really is as simple as that. So yes, I work with lots of people who normally indicate that they're willing to place economic growth, competitiveness, and jobs as priorities in their agenda, and that they're going to take rational approaches to do that. You see, many times we look for complicated solutions to unemployment. The answer to unemployment is really very simple. Whoever gets the investment is going to get the jobs.
Right.
That's the way jobs are created. If you create a climate that's hostile to investment, that investment's going to go somewhere else, and somebody else will get those jobs. What we have to deal with today is that somebody else may not necessarily be in the United States. That might be in Brazil, it may be in China, it may be in India, or other parts of Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe. So we're competing with the rest of the world, not just the state next door, and bad decisions at home mean that jobs go somewhere else. Not easy to see that because it's hard to identify things that didn't happen, because the investor doesn't call you up and say, look, I was going to invest in your state, but because you made such and such a decision, I'm now going to invest in Southeast Asia. I'm going to Thailand, or I'm going to Myanmar, or wherever it might be. That doesn't happen. So we're competing with the rest of the world, not just the state next door. And bad decisions at home mean that jobs go somewhere else. But what you do note is that your growth rates are lower than they should be. That really is a fault of the economic decision makers within your society, whatever state that might be. They are all fixable problems. And thankfully, I think we can see more and more states that would be moving into my column of being better governed, because we're seeing some good governors who are prepared to address tough issues, and we see some of that having been rewarded in the election just over.
Yes, indeed. In fact, as we looked at some of the results coming in from this most recent presidential election, and as well as elections that have taken place in various states for state legislature positions, governors and state legislators, it's been interesting to note how, for example, the voters have elected officials at the state level that are in the center-right arena, and yet at the national level, they voted for President Obama. And as we've also noticed, there were a number of various issues brought up within key states, for example, in Wisconsin and Michigan and other places too, whereby the unions have had a significant setback. It may be very difficult to probably analyze all of those details today, but perhaps we can discuss some of these in the days to come. But if there's any impression that you have from these results, it would be very interesting for our listeners to just get a glimpse of what your thoughts are in that respect.
I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that Wisconsin is a very interesting case, which went strongly for President Obama, both in the presidency and also in electing a Democrat senator against somebody who had been a very popular governor of Wisconsin. But at the same time, you saw the same voters elect two new senators to the state Senate and giving the Republicans control of the Senate, so that now the Republicans control the Senate and the House, plus Scott Walker is the governor. Right. And I think what you see there is a reward for the tough decision-making that Scott Walker has embarked upon. I also think that you see it as a rejection of being able to use extensive union power to dictate to the rest of the economy. You see that in the rejections of the ballot initiatives, not only in Wisconsin but in a number of other places. So you have some kind of a dichotomy where the electorate was looking at local issues with a different lens to the lens they were using to look at national issues. And I think that that's encouraging in that strong leadership is being rewarded. And I think that's what we need to see in Washington is some strong leadership, people who carve out a direction for the future and who show real courage and energy in pursuing those kind of objectives. Even if you don't like the objectives, you actually tend to respect the courage and the leadership.
Do you think that there are a different set of issues that are covered on the local level, actually state level, compared to the federal level when we're looking at elections?
The difference, I think, in the United States between federal issues and state issues is that the state issues are more personal and closer to the individuals, because that really is the interface between the individual and government. They're much closer to, and they are much more affected by the decisions that are made by their state legislature. So they do pay attention to that. At a federal level, then I think that the Democrats fought a very clever campaign, and you have to give them credit for that, in that they moved the focus of the debate in the key states away from the economy and jobs and onto a number of social issues, things that are unlikely even to be debated in Congress in the next 4 years. But that became a focus, and I think that it shifted the attention of a number of key voters in those states, and was enough to be able to guarantee to the president the votes in the Electoral College that he needed to be re-elected.
So we could have seen a different election results if those social issues wouldn't have been raised on the federal level, actually, in the presidential elections.
That may be the case, because what we don't really know is what caused a person to vote one way or another when they go into the ballot box. And even with individuals, it's hard for them to be able to give you an accurate picture of why they did something, because some of that is an accumulation of subconscious issues that build up over a period of time and say, there's something about this party or this candidate that just makes me uneasy. So it won't necessarily be one single thing. We don't have a lot of voters who are single-issue voters, but it's an accumulation of all of the things. And what I think was very adroit was shifting the attention away from the economy, where the administration's record wasn't good, and focusing it on a number of social issues where they thought they were going to be able to persuade enough people to shift course. And, of course, on the issue of immigration, and in particular the Latino community, that was a big issue, and they didn't like the position of the Republican Party on that.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Indeed.
right.
Well, we look forward to continuing our discussion on a myriad of vital and important issues in the days to come. We thank you, Mr. McTigue, for joining us this weekend on America's Roundtable. And the Honorable Mr. McTigue is at the Mercatus Center here in Virginia, and we would encourage individuals to visit their website and read more about the important work that Mr. McTigue is accomplishing in the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. McTigue.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you very much, Natasha.
We would like to relay to our listeners an important event, an event coming up next year. It is a conference hosted by America's Roundtable and the International Leaders Summit. Its title is America's Responsible Capitalism, Jobs, Healthcare, and Prosperity. Its focus will be on advancing principled solutions and pro-growth ideas. This summit will take place in Orlando, Florida, during the first week of May 2013. Our keynote speakers will include leaders from the academia, business, media, think tanks, and the political arena, joined by engaged leaders from local communities. And for our listeners who are interested in receiving an invitation, please email leadersummit@aol.com. leadersummit@aol.com, or visit our website for further details, americasrt.com. We'll be right back. Visit us at americasrt.com. Follow us on Twitter at americasrt. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook. Like and share.